Mhm.
Looks like we're live. So hello, everyone. Welcome again. Good morning. This is Ramoladi from Ramoladi Reports. I'm here with Dr. Eric Karlstrom, and we are here to do Global Gestapo 10, an anniversary tribute to Dr. Rauni Luukanen Kilde. And I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Karlstrom, and he will introduce Dr. Kilde to those who are unfamiliar with her and who she is and who she was and the great work that she's done for all of humanity, really.
Yeah, thank you, Ramola. It's so good to join you. This is the 4th anniversary of Dr. Rauni Kilde's demise. She died in a hospital on February 8th, 2015. She was a very outstanding individual I'll read off a little bit of her biography here in a minute. But for our listeners who are, I think, many TIs, that's better. This book that she wrote posthumously or came out.
There we go. I was going to say, we're not seeing the front of it. Yeah, we are now.
We are now. Yeah, I was looking at the screen and not at the book. This is a book that was put together after her death. It's called Bright Light on Black Shadows. It's available for $45 on Amazon.com or from the publisher, who is a Canadian, at the same price. I bought 2 copies from him. But Dr. Rauni Kilde was targeted for 40 years. And she also is a very highly distinguished and qualified medical person. And I'll read off some of her bio here in a second. So what this means is over 40 years, she was also an insider. Her husband was high up in the UN, in fact, Norway's representative to the UN. She was a political insider. So she comes at it with a very high level of academic expertise and personal acquaintances. She understood what was going on. And of course, the more she tried to tell the world what's coming down the pike, the more harassed she was. And then eventually she was killed. She died at the age of 75. So let me just read her bio here. Dr. Rauni, let's see here with this. Let's see. So many screens here. Let's see. Okay, Dr. Rauni Luukanen Kilde, and excuse me, I'm still sorting out my screens. I've got 6. I've got 6 posts on my website, Gang Stalking Mind Control Cults, which are excerpted from her book, sections that I thought are particularly important. And also I have 14 YouTubes of hers that are posted on my website. I know you probably have some as well. So this is my attempt to share her insights with TIs. Again, my website is gangstalkingmindcontrolcults.com. Okay, here's her bio. Public health and tropical medicine physician and social activist, born in Finland, November 15th, 1939. Lived in Norway from 1991. Died in Finland, February 8th, 2015. Bachelor of Medicine, 1964. Medical doctor, 1967. University of Turku, Finland, 1964. Diploma in tropical medicine, Karolinska Institute, Stockholm, 1970. Certificate of Social Medicine, Nordic School of Public Health, Sweden, 1972. Diploma in Public Health, National Board of Health, Finland, 1974. Diploma in Health Administration, 1980. Intern and resident, University Hospital at Turku and Regional Hospital, Salo. Member of staff at various hospitals, 1969 to 1975. Chief physician at this hospital with a long, difficult to pronounce name, 1970 to 1972. Physician at United Christian Hospital, Lahore, Pakistan, 1968. Acting Director, Environmental Health and Health Education, Finland, 1978. Chief Medical Officer, Lapland, which is northern Finland in this case, 1975 to 1987. Chief Medical Advisor, International Red Cross in Malaysia and Indonesia, 1979. Chief Delegate of Government of Finland, World Health Organization, Tropical Medicine, Geneva, Switzerland, 1978-79. Member of Committee for Arctic Medical Research. Okay,
I'm sharing screens and just showing your website actually with her page on it.
Yeah, that's what she looks like. Well, that's enough. We can move on to something else. The important thing is that she began to be targeted in the mid-70s, and in her book she gives many accounts of what's going on, who's behind it, and the larger issues that surround this thing, which I think are huge because it has to do with the robotization and mind control of all of humanity. Now, all of those in favor of the bio-robotization and mind control of all of humanity, we're not going to have too many hands.
No, I don't. I think you will find them, in the cybernetics departments and the artificial intelligence and transhumanist departments of MIT and, all of these other tech institutes where you have all these tech geeks who've decided the singularity in AI is the way to go and believe that, they have a right to progressively evolve humanity. They dare to use the word evolve, actually, which is a joke in itself. But they believe they have the right to progressively evolve humanity into a different species, a cybernetic species, interlinked with machines, with computers, and linked to a supercomputer, and thereby enter the, the realm of the Borg that we're all familiar with. So the cyborg species that they are pushing humanity toward. But you did a great job talking about her great background and giving people an idea as to how incredibly qualified in the medical sciences and in many sciences, the physical sciences as well, Dr. Rauni Kilde was. And what an enormous gift she's actually given us by going to whole bunches of different kinds of conferences, whether they were non-lethal weapons conferences or military medicine conferences or neurology conferences, and kind of eavesdropping on what the quote-unquote elites and militaries of the world were up to. And so she's, transferred that information into her books, her videos, her talks, and she's pretty much let us know what's been going on for the last 50 years and well before, right? Because one of the things she brings forward is that mind control has been going on for ages, for hundreds of years, not just the last 50 years. It's been going on since 1810. I think in one of her talks, she talks about the first mind control machine was invented in 1810.
In 1801, and that was information that she got at a medical conference that was run by the military. She got that information from John Alexander.
John Alexander, yes. Now, she mentions 1801, Eric, but I should say I looked it up and it says 1810 on a site with John Alexander's name on it, something called the heirloom machine. Mind control machine. Yeah. So maybe she made a mistake. I don't know. We have to verify that. But in any case, that's pretty ancient, 1810 or 1801. Very old.
And the first implants, she says, go back to 1874 at a
hospital
in Ohio. And so, yes, this has been a long push for by the elites to try to robotize in order to control humanity. They believe that they're above the law. It's their right and responsibility to control the rest of us. And, Dr. Rauni Kilde does not sugarcoat it. She says, well, the plan by the elite since the 1992 Rio Earth Summit is to eliminate 2/3 of humanity. Okay, 5 billion people. So they're going to do this with psychotronics. They're going to do this with psychological warfare. They're going to do this with chemical warfare. Well, okay, there's the spraying in the sky. There's the zapping from, the microwaves that we're all feeling with our Wi-Fi world now. We're all in this soup of electromagnetic frequencies that is perhaps trillions of times more than our grandparents would have experienced, because while electromagnetic frequencies and wavelengths are totally natural, they have been now weaponized. And the top brains from Nikola Tesla on have figured out what each frequency and wavelength can do and how it interacts with the human organism and others, and which wavelengths cause anger, which cause love, which cause pain, which cause fury, etc., we can be then manipulated like dolls. Unknown to us, we can be manipulated by a third party. And this is what the Pentagon and the CIA have been working on ferociously since World War II with the MK Ultra and other. And so this is really a secret history of our nation and our world, which people are not aware of, which the trap has been set around us. And as we go to, second G, third G, fourth G, and now fifth generation wireless communication at the gigahertz level, well, these frequencies, which are billions of gigahertz is a billion hertz, and a hertz is a cycle per second. So we're talking about extremely high frequency, a cycle per second. Imagine a wavelength, a trough, and a peak going by a point in 1 second. Okay, the brain works on the level of extremely low frequencies, maybe 7 to 20 or 120 even hertz. Okay, so that also the electrical wiring in your home is at 60 hertz. So they know they've weaponized these frequencies to entrain the brain, but now the gigahertz is a billion hertz per second. That means very, very small wavelengths and very, very great frequency. And now at 60 hertz and 95 hertz, these are the same frequencies as the non-lethal weapons.
Yes, and you're talking about very high frequencies, and then you're absolutely talking about directed energy weapons at that point, microwave pulse weapons or millimeter wave weapons. And in fact, when I was speaking to Mark Steele, he was saying, there's actually a huge mythology being promulgated about these the 5G operating in the gigahertz range, because they're actually operating 5G. They're rolling out 5G in the under gigahertz range, in the sub-gigahertz range, in the sort of the 800 megahertz range is what he was talking about, and how it's related to the LED lights that have been put up all around where he lives in Gateshead in Northern England. So I have no doubt they are trying to sneak in things. I mean, isn't this the way it goes? Isn't technology sort of rolled into our midst without much awareness or much information being put out as to the health benefits or the health damages that might result? And then people find out later about it. And, you brought up so many issues, actually. Two of them, I think, are the two issues that I've gotten clips lined up from Dr. Kilde to play, Eric. And maybe we should play the first one right now, because the first one is about what you were saying, how EMF is in our environment right now. We are inundated. We are literally breathing it in. We are existing in this sea of EMF. And because of that, all sorts of things are happening around us that today are perhaps wrongfully being attributed to things like global warming. And that's what, Dr. Kilde says. So let me just share this little clip.
Go ahead.
This is a clip from the very first video on that page on your website, actually, and it is a Veritas interview, and I'll just play 3 minutes of it. And, thank very much the Veritas producers for creating this video and having this conversation with Dr. Kilde, and I hope they don't mind us playing this here. Just for fair use, educational purposes, etc.
It's not true. Yes. And there are hundreds of scientists who go against Al Gore and the UN organization, which got the Nobel Prize for this.
We need more volume.
I'm trying to bump it up as much as I can.
The greenhouse effect, etc. And now the thing is, nobody said even a word about the reality of probably which causes all this melting of the ice and the bees are disappearing and whales are dying, etc. It's electromagnetic fields which have increased tremendously all around the world. And even Obama is trying to, as president, saying that, we should sort of close down atom bombs and whatever. Well, they're local, even if the winds go around, but electromagnetic fields go around the world, the planet, and every single nation, every single country. That is the big threat. I think that's the biggest threat right now. And people have no idea, because people die of cancer, which increases. People die of Alzheimer's, which increases. and they don't even realize that the real reason for the extreme increase are electromagnetic fields done deliberately also to cause diseases, so-called normal diminish the world population. And the elite, if I can use that word, which steers the world, and it's not the governments. Governments are errand boys for the elite. So the elite says that, oh, our planet is overpopulated and it needs reduction of the population dramatically, even by about 5 billion when we are 6.9 billion today. So that, in my mind, is not true. The truth, in my mind, is that they are extremely afraid of the middle classes, which are increasing in numbers, and the middle class is a threat to the elite, not the working class. They call them, well, all of us, they call them cattle. You know, we normal people are cattle for them. And the working class would not start a revolution, but the middle class could, and that's why they need to diminish as much as possible. And it's done, you know, so that people don't realize, like the newest thing is now the swine flu vaccinations, which are toxic and which could kill a lot of people. And in the States, I just heard that, like in Massachusetts, it's going to be compulsory. Of course, in the other civilized nations, it's never compulsory. Finland made a change in laws, and I think they were very smart. They decided that the swine flu virus is not anymore listed in the list of contaminated dangerous diseases, and when it's not in that list, of course, nobody can force you to take a vaccination. Also, here in Norway, I just read that Folk Institute directed that no, we have never even considered compulsory vaccination, but U.S. has other kinds of thoughts, and I'm very, very sorry for the American people who have to go through this, because it's going to be a catastrophe.
And I say this all the time.
So that was really interesting, wasn't it? She's basically talking about the takeover of the world, which is something we were talking about a little bit before we started this show this morning, and the many different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the most outrageous kind of James Bond spy movie you can actually real. You know, yeah, we have now the era of intelligence agencies, you know, that running the world for the elite. Can you hear me, Romola? I just got a sign on my computer saying that the connection was unstable.
I can hear you, but the audio's been a little broken up. But I can hear you now.
Okay, well,
there's a little bit of a delay, but that's
I don't know. Can
okay.
we?
I'll let you know if it's not, if it's so bad that I can't, you know, comprehend what you're saying or anything.
Okay, now what I see, Romola, is you and myself, but I don't see my screen. Can I get my screen back?
You can hit share. Click share.
Okay. Share. Great. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's pick this up where you want. Yeah, she understood what's going on, and it is, you know, she has some great explanations that are very succinct that tell us what's going on, and the fact that if you do understand this, you're going to be targeted in just the way that we are familiar with, because the elite don't want opposition, and they have figured out ways, you know, electronically and with the gang stalking technologies and whatnot, to neutralize, silence all dissent. And so the great thing about Rauni Kilde's work is it gives us the big picture. You know?
It is, and you know, one of the most remarkable things is that she made very manifest, in public conversation, this whole notion of non-lethal weapons and directed energy weapons, which at the time that she was speaking about them, from the 90s onward, nobody was really speaking about them publicly. I think Dr. Nick Begich was writing at the time in the 90s about them. And, Dr. Rauni Kilde was speaking about them. I think maybe Cheryl Welsh as well, Paul Baird, Soleil Mavis. A few people were, speaking out about them. Harlan Gerard. They were putting up websites, putting information out. But she was going to conferences. She was speaking openly about them and then beginning to write as well. We have just this one book, Bright Light on Black Shadows, but she's got a whole bunch of other publications prior to this, many other books that she's put out, and across a vast spectrum of her interests, because, she was interested in life after death and UFOs and things like that. So she's written on all of these different subjects, I gather. The paranormal, parapsychology.
And she would have been an insider, going to military conferences on this. The CIA has been very interested in the paranormal. They call it remote viewing, but really it amounts to telepathy, or what's the word where you can see the future? Clairvoyance.
Clairvoyance.
And she claims that some 64% of the human race has some clairvoyant abilities. And one of the chief goals of these CIA projects is to make sure that this capability is suppressed in the population, so that
apparently those guys, the CIA and also the military, right, all of those compartmentalized characters in the military divisions and so forth in the military, are very interested in finding, sort of rooting out among the population, who the really psychic people are, so that they can sort of zero in on them, hone in on them, keep an eye on them, and control them extensively. So if you have any psychic skills, anybody, or if you've developed them, just don't let the military know. Although apparently they find out eventually.
Very good point. A lot of this goes back to the British Psychical Society or whatever in the late 1800s. And then that migrated over to America in the early 20th century. So a lot of this is coming out of this elite psychic research, But listen to the names of some of these programs and conferences that Rauni Kilde identifies in some of her YouTubes. 1989, well, of course, Project Moonstruck goes back to 1952. 1952, they're putting implants in people's heads. They're talking about electrical stimulation of the brain back in 1952. MK Ultra, of course, the CIA mind control project starts in 1953, building on earlier projects like Bluebird and Artichoke and Chatter, etc. But the idea is to create a mind control individual that can be used, that they can control for their own purposes, even if it's against the self-interest and self-preservation of that individual. In other words, a zombie slave. Gracias. And this goes back to 53. Okay, give some personal perspective. I was 4 years old. My uncle was in the high in the CIA. I was in the DC area. These guys were doing top secret experiments. This is so top secret that nobody knew about it at the time. But now, of course, the word's out. And we have to spread the word. This is what our governments have been doing with our taxpayer dollars. They've been trying to create bio-robots. And of course, Rauni Kilde is all over this. Here she's talking about some of the recent military programs. 1990, the CIA had an RF media program, radio frequency media program. The purpose, programming and triggering behavioral desire.
This is incredible. This is precisely what I was talking about, the suppression.
So, subversion of psychic abilities of the population, preparatory processing for mass electromagnetic control. Okay, this is a CIA program, 1990. And, hey, gosh, thanks, guys. We'd love to be mass electromagnetically controlled. Can we pay you some more money to do this?
Actually, this is major, Eric. Let's just pause there. And do you mind sending me the link to this document if you have it? Because I will report on it. Because anything that promises mass control of humanity, I think is very, very important at this time to get out to the general public. Because people seem to think, oh, just a few TIs here and there are being targeted. So let's all, keep our heads down, shut up, not speak out, and we'll be safe. Hello? Mass humanity, or everybody is being targeted, and in many vicious ways. And this sounds like a particularly vicious one. What is it exactly? Triggering behavioral desire? Programming and triggering behavioral desire. Wow.
Yeah, it's one of the YouTubes that I have loaded on my website. And I take notes on these YouTubes. And she's basically reading her own information, her notes of some of the programs. I can send you the link to my notes.
Yeah.
And I can send you the link to the actual video. But the next one she mentioned, same year, 1990, the Tower program by the CIA and the NSA. The purpose, this is done with microwaves now, is programming through neural resonance and encoded information. The desired effect is neural degeneration, DNA resonance modification, psychic suppression, and the pseudonym for the program is Wedding Bells.
My God.
So the last program was I think it had a different pseudonym. I can't remember. I don't have it written down here. But see, these are the kinds of this kind of information that we need.
Yes, absolutely. And, isolating it as you have just makes it look so bombshell. It does make us think anew, oh my God, this is all contained in her book. It's contained in her talks. So, and, in one of her, actually, I did tape, I'll play another clip shortly. I did tape a little bit of Miles Johnston's interview with her, where he actually looked at some of her documents and she shows them to the camera, and she's got this, folder of papers, both her own articles and agendas from conferences, etc. That really sort of, drive it home. This is it. This documentation does exist. And one of the things she showed, I remember, was how the various departments of the U.S. Department of Defense, the U.S. Navy, various research arms of the U.S. Department of Defense were doing experiments in Scandinavia on mentally ill people in Scandinavia through, contracts, I guess, with governments. So this is sort of mind-blowing stuff. How could the US go and experiment on people in another country? How is that even possible? So I think that's where we begin to, connect the dots here. This kind of research has been going on on a global scale for a very long time, and which goes back to globalist elitist intentions for the world, for takeover of the world.
Absolutely, and the paper trail is there, and Dr. Rauni Kilde has it. Now, the other subtext, of course, of interest to us is that she herself was subject to these gang stalking protocols since the mid-70s. And she talks in her videos about how 8 years worth of documents that she had put together, a lot of her own materials, would disappear from out of her house, be stolen, and then 8 years later would reappear. I mean, and she talks a lot about the things that actually happened to her. And she actually prints here in this book the gang stalking manual, basically coming out of the CIA, MK Ultra, and Kubark torture techniques that was used in the Operation Gladio in Italy during post-World War II, and all the stay-behind armies that were posted secretly throughout Europe. Okay, they're doing terrorism. They are terrorizing the population into submission with these kinds of gang stalking techniques, and of course assassination and other things. So that's the other subtext, that while Rauni Kilde is trying to get the word out, and she knows, because she knows the people involved, and she knows the plans, she goes to the conferences, she even gives talks at some of them, she's being gang stalked and murdered, slow kill murder. So this is an incredible story that all TIs, I think, can learn from. We can learn from the information that she put together, and we can learn. She studied them for 40 years. She knows what the stalking is about, and she knows who's behind it.
That's right. And, you know, it's actually incredible listening to her video conversations because she's sort of a walking encyclopedia, isn't she? She's just incredibly scholarly and very incredibly brilliant and intelligent and able to hold so much information together and impart it, synthesize it, pull it all together from many different corners and, you know, bring it forward in a way that's very conducive to understanding, very comprehensible.
Yeah, and she saw the big picture. She saw the, you know, it's like we talked about last time, you know, with a telephoto lens or a zoom lens, you can zoom in, you can zoom back, you know, to the wide angle, you can zoom in to the fine details. She had that all. She had that all. And then, of course, she goes further with all this ET stuff, which I tend to leave aside, you know, and she's got kind of some new age religious beliefs, which I also tend to leave aside. But that's fine. You know, everybody is entitled to their worldview. And she did a lot of investigation, so she's probably worth listening to. She knew 6 languages, and the books that you mentioned, you know, were written in these other languages. And so the only book that has come out in English is this Bright Light on Black Shadow. And that came out posthumously, and it's horribly edited. It needs some help, Romola. If you have another clone or two, you could fix this up.
I should probably connect with the publisher and offer editing. If he wishes to put out a second edition, I'd be happy to help. That would, you know, be an education for me as well and keep me focused on the info that she's put out, which I definitely want to, you know, peruse in greater depth and report on, actually, because as you are showing, there's so much in there that we are kind of, you know, skipping through as we are reading her books. So we need to focus in on some of these most important aspects that I think everybody needs to know, not just those who are targeted. You know, those who are targeted know Dr. Kilde, know that she is a voice for the targeted. But those who are not targeted, or at least I should perhaps revise that, those who do not know they are targeted and imagine that they are not being targeted just as quote unquote targeted individuals are, also need to hear what Dr. Kilde has put forward, because she is bringing forward the plan. You know, the unfortunate plan that I personally don't see any evidence of being stemmed. You know, even as we hear all this stuff about Q and QAnon and the white hats and, you know, changes coming and Trump doing good things and this, that, and the other. I mean, I don't know if they, you know, it's very hard to see that happening, but despite all that, when you go look at the DoD website, you know, you look at the defense one, their newsletter, you look at the information that's coming out of the DoD every single day, you look at all of the conferences, such as, for instance, the Emerging Weapons Biodefense Conference that we were looking at, that was held on Feb 5. And, you know, I just happened to catch a bit of it live and heard a mention of neurocognitive weapons, which I promptly put out on Twitter and sent to everybody and put on my website immediately. A little snippet, that's all. Just a little snippet was mentioned of neurocognitive weapons posing a threat to American soldiers because they are capable of inducing advanced Alzheimer's in a matter of days. But when you hear about this and you see all of these conferences going on, you begin to understand that the plans to run biodefense or to run cyber defense are simply marching ahead. And all of that appears to be, and this is what we were talking about earlier, weren't we? The Hegelian dialectic, the thesis, antithesis, solution.
Synthesis, yeah.
Synthesis.
Problem, reaction,
solution scenario where you have a pandemic being posited as the new major threat of the next century, or rather this century, and then all of the biodefense that we have to muster with biosurveillance and environmental surveillance and so forth. So this is really a prop for the surveillance industry and for the war industry, for the defense industry. And, you know, this is how they keep pushing their way into the future by creating newer and newer problems. And meanwhile, we've got the US Naval Bioweapons Lab, Biowarfare Lab, that literally creates bioweapons.
Yeah, it's almost as if, you know, the news we watch is scripted fantasy. It's a play. It's a puppet show. And what's really happening is this technocracy has been marching forward with the telecommunications companies and with the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about in 1961, which has, literally taken over. So you have this merger then of the elite and the mafia and the military and the intelligence agencies. And as Rauni Kilde pointed out, our prime ministers and presidents, they don't have any power. In fact, they are controlled themselves with these same technologies.
Correct. Yes. And that's the other clip I wanted to play, actually, where she talks about George Bush being controlled.
Oh, sure. And not only George Bush, but all of them, So these are technologies they've developed in secret over, the last 70, 80, 90 years. And it is massively rolled out. So Rauni Kilde would say we're all targets. We're all targeted individuals. So it's not just a stigma upon you or me or, Dr. Rauni Kilde. It's we understand what's happening. So maybe, they're the boot's coming down a little harder on us, but the boot's coming down on everybody.
It is. And the thing that she talks about, that these weapons are being used by the shadow presence, the shadow government, composed of the mafia and the CIA and the FBI and so on, and everybody else. These weapons have been used and been fine-tuned for a very long time. So now they are literally, in cell phones or in little portable handheld thingies that look like cell phones. So literally somebody could be standing behind you at a state dinner or at an inauguration or at a meeting and simply taking care of how you engage your cognitive processes and how well you can remember what you were going to say and stop you from saying something if they don't like what you are saying. So it's that close. I think it's that close. And if you look at some of the congressional, panels and so forth, you watch what's going on, you do begin to see there's a lot of covert stuff going on right there. And there are people always fiddling with cell phones, which of course have become ubiquitous today. It's nothing now for people to just sit and look at their cell phones all the time. But what if they're also being used as little weapons to shoot little frequencies at somebody's brain? Because they can be. This is not an issue of paranoia. This is exactly what Dr. Kilde is, giving witness to, and something that we are picking up as we look at the documents ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. And okay, so let me just throw out a couple direct quotes from Rauni Kilde from her YouTubes, which people can look at on my website and elsewhere. She says, mass remote mind control by blanket coverage of the population is achieved via the mobile phone network. Okay, there's our 2G, 3G, 4G, and now 5G networks. Then she says governments use any means to control and condition the ones they govern. It is about power, control, and money. Prime ministers are errand boys, she says. There's nothing they can do. Then she says government actually means mind control. Govern is meant as mind, and govern is to control. So government means mind control. That's an interesting.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
And then she says the governments are controlled by secret governments. And in 1972, the CIA research director said, mind control means a world where every human and through every emotion, every observation, and every need can be controlled through electrical stimulation of the brain. Okay, so there we have the technology. It's an ESB, electrical stimulation of the brain, and we have many names for it now, remote neural monitoring and virtual telepathy and synthetic telepathy, et cetera, V2K. But this is the director speaking in 1972. Okay, this is how they intend to do it. And they are doing it with this electromagnetic soup.
Oh, you're muted. I'm sorry, you're muted right now. Oh, you're unmuted now.
Okay.
How did that happen?
Yeah, that happened without my intention. I didn't touch any buttons. Yeah, this is the world that she saw. This is the world that we see. This is the world that you and I and many others are trying to prevent. We're trying to stand up for freedom of thought, freedom of human choice, the rights of the individual, the dignity of the individual. But our elite care nothing for these things. In fact, We
The
become
natural evolution of humanity, the natural evolution of the human brain, the human consciousness. That's what they're trying to stop, right?
and the notion that the humans are the crown of God's creation, and I would agree with that. I would say there is something amazing about humans that is very, very special, and they're trying to destroy and suppress that. So they become then the enemies of all human progress. They have taken the dark side. They want a robotized population that they can control and genocide. Well, that makes them the enemy of humanity. That makes them the enemy of God. That makes them the enemy of everything that is sacred. So you and I, we're on the right side of this fight. They're on the wrong side of this fight, and we need to widely publicize the dimensions of the battle, which is now occurring. Of course, they want to paint us, as paranoid, schizophrenic, delusional, blah, 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 the old psychiatric reprisal. But in fact, we are freedom fighters for humanity. And we can point to the people and the agencies that have killed people like Dr. Rauni Kilde. It's murder. It's a slow kill, torture, murder program that needs to be, it needs to be punished. The individuals need to be identified. They need to go to trial. They need to be punished in order that this kind of thing stops. So, one of the subtexts I was hoping we could develop here is, who killed Dr. Rauni Kilde? Well, this is a murder mystery. It's a murder mystery unless you do some investigation. Take a guy like Gerald Sosby, an FBI-trained investigator. He can solve it in a minute. He knows who killed Dr. Rauni Kilde. You know who killed Dr. Rauni Kilde. Dr. Rauni Kilde knows who killed Dr. Rauni Kilde. It was the intelligence agencies that have roped in various sectors of society, to become the perpetrators, to harass and torture and terrorize these people like her that are classified now as TIs. But all they are really is human beings who are trying to live their lives and defend humanity from this program, to biorobotize all of us, to control all of us, to genocide 2/3 of us. I think that's pretty big news.
It is, and the thing that you're talking about, those who are targeted, who are, I dislike the term targeted individuals very much, because it seems to me a military name that somebody imposed on those who are targeted for no reason. Because as we know, these are military programs. These are military and Secret Service programs being run by, the whole coterie of bankers, Vatican, the usual suspects, the guys who are running the show behind the scenes, shadow government, mafiosi. Sitting on the world's gold and destroying humanity. And as you say, they are on the wrong side of history, and they're on the wrong side of humanity, because they are acting against humanity with everything that they are doing. Their primary attitude of taking decisions for humanity, that elitist attitude, that extremely authoritarian, patronizing, and patriarchal attitude, that in itself is the most reprehensible. Because starting from there, they are willing to go to the point of murder to establish their idea of what the world should be. They want a world that's protective to them and protective to their profit-gathering interests, whereas the rest of us need to be stamped out of existence, according to them. So obviously we are standing up for humanity, and we're speaking out. And the thing I wanted to say really was that those who are targeted, who know that they are targeted, including us, we have become privy all of a sudden to the entire arsenal of weapons that are being used against humanity. And this is why everyone who's targeted is a natural whistleblower. By simply speaking out about the nature of the targeting, you are a natural whistleblower. Now, the entire field of psychiatry, every psychiatrist in existence, every doctor in existence has got a lot to answer for daring to call those who are targeted and who are reporting victims of this extreme targeting and surveillance abuse and non-consensual military intel experimentation, daring to call them, that is us, psychotic, in the midst of a psychotic episode, in the midst of acute psychosis, somebody who is psychiatrically unhealthy, who's mentally unwell, who's delusional, etc. I mean, these psychiatrists should know very well what the score is, what the military is doing. We are speaking about military technology that is being used against humans, not just myself, not just Dr. Karlstrom, but everybody on the planet to varying degrees. There literally has now been established a subclass of humans whom we can call weapon wielders. They exist in our midst. They are wielding weapons against us. And I will name the big telecom companies in that midst, because the telecom companies are permitting this electronic grid to be set up. And public-private partnerships are permitting all sorts of companies to engage, to use their vans like FedEx, USPS, UPS, to use their vans, their utility service vans, their parcel carrying vans, to be equipped with directed energy weapons technology, which is being used on people in neighborhoods. Now, this is all being done covertly. It's being done surreptitiously. And those who are targeted know how it's being done, when it's being done, what's being carried out on them, and who's responsible. So the rest of humanity do need to pay attention to those who are targeted, because those who are targeted know they are targeted and are speaking out are whistleblowers, not targeted individuals.
Yeah, that's very well said. Yeah. Dr. Rauni Kilde, she called it right. She said, we are living in an era where everything is controlled by the elite and intelligence agencies, and those opposing their tyranny are eliminated with mind-controlled, microchipped patsies, or false flag suicide or accidents or induced illnesses. The organization that rules the world today behind the scenes is the New World Order, Illuminati with the Star of David, CIA, FBI, British intelligence, and their local lackeys. Their goal is the next generation as biological robots, and the middle class has to be eliminated. Global secret government organization rules the world behind the scenes. Many things point to Jewish sources: banking, political figureheads, Hollywood movies, TV, radio, press ownerships internationally. Parts of armies and intelligence organizations are recruited to secret government with many high political figures, from heads of state to big industry. They run the world with tens of thousands of recruits who are their errand boys all over the world, high-ranking officers, judges, politicians, members of parliaments, EU, some members of intelligence services, police, commerce, and ministries work for this organization along with their daily duties. Mafia is strongly involved, so is drug industry from South and North America. That is how they get their money to run the show. Arms sales, antique and art industry are among other money-making businesses. You know, one of the ways that we can answer this question, who killed Dr. Rauni Kilde? Who has the money and the reach to execute a program like this globally, all over the world? It's a global program. There is all the money in the world they need. Okay, you can go back to, Douglas Valentine's book, CIA is Organized Crime, how covert operations corrupt America and the world. And he's quoting a Vietnamese reporter. He's talking about what happened in the Vietnam War. And he said, well, the CIA spends money like water. Well, they get their money directly from, the banks, the people who print the money, the funny money out of nothing. They're just making money, with a entry on a computer pad, there's nothing behind it. So, and then of course they control the world's drug trade, $600 billion a year. Okay, that's their funny money too, so their slush money comes from everywhere. And so they can afford to spend any amount of money on Operation Romola D, or Operation Eric Karlstrom, or Operation Rauni Kilde. And this can be handed off to various groups. You see, and this is exactly what Gloria Naylor describes in her book, 1994, how, Operation Gloria Naylor is conducted by this group for a while, and then they bring in somebody else, and then they bring somebody else, all ways to take down a good citizen who happens to be very intelligent, named Gloria Naylor. It's incredible. It's the most illegal thing. Oops. Okay. I agree.
Any better?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay. Well, I did get a message just now from Zoom saying that they found my speakers were faulty and they were removing them. Now, I don't know why that would happen, but that really looks to me like cyber hacking at the Zoom end, and I'm going to have to send them a sharp note shortly. But if you can hear me without the microphone, I'll be...
Did you hear my diatribe there, Romola?
I did, yes, and I was adding to it, but never mind. Since you didn't hear me.
It's fine. I saw your lips moving, so I know you were talking, but I just couldn't hear you. For that.
Sorry. So if you didn't hear me, nobody else heard me. I was just merely agreeing with what you said, and I was saying that, you know, basically Gloria Naylor's book is 1996, not 1994, but she points to exactly what Dr. Kilde is talking about. And, you know, her story, Gloria Naylor's story, was very U.S.-centered because she was living here in the U.S. But, and what Dr. Kilde is talking about is from Europe. But Dr. Kilde is also very aware of what's going on around the world, including in the U.S., I think, with everybody who's being targeted. And also, basically, what she's pointing to is this massive operation, this massive substructure in society, you know, whether you call it the company, you know, the CIA's company, or Gladio, as the CIA's presence in Europe, I guess, is known as, you know, it's not just the CIA, but it's all of those NATO and Secret Service organizations together that operate through NATO, etc. And or the organization, I think they've got some other words, right? The order, they call it the order or the organization.
There are many names, yeah. The organization, the enterprise, the firm, the brotherhood. You know, Kay Griggs talked about it as the brotherhood. You know, but yeah, it's the same thing. You know,
exactly. All of these different names, whatever you call it, it's this vast group of people. It's, I mean, I'd love to know what percentage of the population is actually caught up in this.
Hey, amigo. Hola, amigo.
It seems like an increasing number of people are being caught into it. And as we know in the US, well, certainly everywhere else in the world as well, our neighborhoods are being pulled into it. So even those people who probably do not believe that it's right to torment and persecute and scapegoat anybody else, those people in our neighborhoods are also being pulled into these operations of doing precisely that. Precisely that. Tormenting, persecuting, and scapegoating people in their own communities. You know, there's no love thy neighbor as thyself anymore in operation. In the Five Eyes countries or any other part of the world where this global substructure is operant currently.
Very true. And you know, if you go to Rauni Kilde's book here on page 255, she talks about the organization and describes it. And then she talks about how it works on all levels of society, and that it recruits all sectors of society, and that these recruits then get pulled into the organization. They themselves can be targeted, and so it's almost like they sign a deal with the devil. You know, it's almost like, okay, you work with us if you ever tell, there's going to be trouble in your life. You know? And so this is a manner of controlling them as well. So it's not a good deal to be a perpetrator if you read the details. It's a very bad deal. Good deal maybe in the short term. In the long term, it's very bad.
It is, but as you were saying, you know, they're running these terror operations. They're running it like little cells. This is the new Phoenix operation, isn't it? So there's an element of terrorizing and intimidation of the populace that goes hand in hand with it. And this is why your neighbors and my neighbors have lost their minds, have lost their souls and spirits and consciences, and are simply doing what they are told, like robots, not realizing they are paving the way for this horrific takeover of humanity, whereby their own children are going to be enslaved if they do not have the guts to stand up, you know. And this is why I think it's time for us to start appealing and start pointing out to the adults in our neighborhoods that they need to wake the hell up to see what's going on, because their children and grandchildren are going down the tubes really, really fast. Because this enslavement is being rolled out at every level. It's being rolled out at the science and tech level, you know, with the assaults that we were talking about, the aerosols, the fluoride in the water, the mandatory vaccinations, the biowarfares and pandemics, which no doubt, you know, are coming down the pike because they've got a biodefense plan. So no doubt they've got a bio-pandemic plan as well. So when all of that is being planned for us, that's the science and tech aspect. There's also the legal aspect, right? I mean, look at the laws that are coming down the pike over here. All the mandatory stuff, the real ID. You all have to sign up for a real ID. You know, it's going to be papers, please, at every, you know, as you're driving down the road now, or very shortly in the future. So the plans that are being made are increasingly dictatorial, Gestapo-like. So, and then you've got the cyborging. You see the cyborging, the microchipping, the nanotech, and the public education and the mind control. You see, this is why they want to keep these weapons quiet. And they want to call TIs paranoid delusional, because they want to keep the weapons very, very quiet and continue to mind control people into a state of passivity, docility, placidity. People who are unable to speak out against their own enslavement because, hello, they won't know they're enslaved. I mean, what is that famous quote about people loving their slavery so much? Was it Aldous Huxley, or I always forget who it was, but
that's right. That's the vision that he presented back in the 40s to a group in San Francisco. And of course, we were really dealing with a totalitarian fascist system with elements of George Orwell, 1984, and elements of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. I mean, it's both, you know, it's both
Absolutely.
of those things.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And mix that in with Delgado's psycho-civilized world, right?
1960s, from the 1960s. Yeah, this is the elite plan for a long time.
I'm holding up my Delgado over here, which I just got in the mail. So, toward a psycho-civilized world, it's a physical control of the mind.
Well, you know, I have to, you know, interject. You know, what do you know what Bill 1 is in 2000? Senate Bill 1. Do you know what that is?
I'm sorry, didn't
Senate
quite
Bill 1. Do you know what Senate Bill 1 is in 2019? It's a law that prohibits any criticism of Israel. And it was passed almost unanimously in the Senate. Now it's going to the House. Well, this is exactly the first law that
yes, the criticism of Israel.
First law. Yeah, it's illegal. And the first law that Lenin passed after he took the government over of Russia after the Bolshevik Revolution forbade any criticism of Jews. The anti-Semitism law was the first law. So we are now at the beginning, really, of the communist Russia cycle of genocide, really. I mean, you have to look at that 75-year period as a period of 66 million people were terrorized and tortured and killed under the Jews that ran the Soviet Union. And,
I would say, yes, we are. But, you know, there's already laws in place, aren't there? There are many places that don't even allow vaccine exemptions now, mandatory vaccinations. There is a big push by many parents who are very aware to stop mandatory vaccinations. And, you know, I'm just waking up to that. And I used to follow this a little bit earlier. I think I need to follow it again because it is very much a part of the scenario. Because this is the means by which they are going to control populations. Once they start saying you have to take this particular injection, you have to take this vaccination, that's when you're opening yourself and your children up, you know, both for ill health and genocide. Because if you do not have control of your own body, control of your own immune system, and you do not have control over your own lives, you know, and your children's lives, and, you know, actually looking at the number of stories coming out of vaccine damages and babies just dying like 6 days after a vaccination, for instance, that is that is, heads up regenocide, isn't it? So.
Well, yeah. Again, Rauni Kilde tells us over and over again that is the end to genocide humanity. Now, personally, I didn't vote for that. I'm totally opposed to the genocide of humanity. I don't think there are too many humans. I think if there's a small group that thinks there are too many humans on the planet, they should volunteer to leave. The elite should volunteer to leave the planet, take their own lives or whatever, so that the rest of us can enjoy God's beautiful creation here. But meanwhile, if we just follow that thread a little bit, we see in 1979 in Israel, Operation Talpiot was put into effect, where from a couple Jewish professors, you had an elite military unit now cooperating with elite government and corporate sector enterprises to take over and dominate artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, 5G and 4G, and telecommunications. So Israel now wants to be in a position to control all telecommunications, 5G for the world, and to control the Internet. Okay, now, so that's quite a bit of control, isn't it? Considering that 5G includes these non-lethal weapons, these lethal non-lethal weapons. So now that gives this small country with a very, 0.1% of the world's population, the ability to control the entire world. This is the goal, and it has a 3,000-year plan, by the way. I've researched this so that I'm satisfied. I'm not being prejudiced against anybody. There is a 3,000-year plan for this one tribe to take over the world. And now they have the means, and they're doing it. And unfortunately, we need to say, no, I don't vote for that. You can't take over the world. You can't take over my world. You can't take over my country. Why has this group been expelled from 107 nations in the last 2,000 years? Because that's what they always do. That's what they always do. They act as a group, a state within a state, a nation within a nation, as a fifth column enemy to overcome and take over that nation and destroy it. Well, I'm sorry. You do not have my permission to destroy the United States of America, even though you've gone pretty far down that road. I think the American people better wake up and realize that, this fifth column enemy group has operated with the intelligence agencies, that it is the backbone of the secret government and the corporatocracy, and that we don't accept it. I'm sorry, we don't accept it. We're going to turn off our devices. We're going to go back to nature. We're going to live simply. We're not going to let you control us through our telecommunications or anything else, vaccines or anything else. We are going to stand up for humanity. We're not going to go into the cyborg world. We're not going to go into the slave world that you have planned for us. The Jewish Talmud says, when our Messiah returns, every Jew will have 2,800 Gentile slaves. Well, the hell with you. I'm not going to be your slave. It's of course why I'm targeted, right?
Yeah, actually, you're talking about the Jewish supremacists who have been running this. But, one of the things I've been lately looking at also are the Jesuits, and how the Jesuits have been over time sort of entrenching. And particularly now, apparently, the current Pope is a Jesuit, right? And
Ignatius Loyola, the founder of the Society of Jesus, was a Jew, and this became the military branch of the Roman Catholic Church in order to defeat the Protestant Reformation. And then they pursued the objectives of the Catholic Church in very much of a power Machiavellian sort of way. But the Jesuits are latecomers compared to this 3,000-year-old plan. So, again, if we just look at the history of these things, we'll see that Jesuits are a crypto-Jewish.
Interesting. What about the Vatican itself, and the whole history of Rome and all of these popes from way back in time, because they amassed a whole bunch of wealth as well, right, across the centuries?
Yeah, there's a lot of people that want to put this all on the Vatican, and I'm not going to, I think that is a transference away from the real fifth column group, which is Judaism, but certainly 20 popes supposedly in the history of the Roman Catholic Church have been Jews, or crypto Jews, secret Jews. So you have this back and forth. Jesus, of course, was crucified by the Jews. But now if you say that, according to the new anti-BD law or anti-BD law, you can be put on a watch list. You can be put on a blacklist. If you say that, which the Bible says. The Bible says that the Jews killed Jesus, although they got the Romans to actually do the deed. So that falls in with the general strategy, which was enunciated in 2003 by the Prime Minister of Malaysia. He says Jews rule the world by proxy. They get others to do their killing and dying for them. So there's always then a puppet who will execute the illegal deeds, for money or whatever.
Well, it certainly seems as if the Zionists and the Jesuits work together at any rate. So when you look at the sort of the collusions and who's running the world and all of these banks, the Bank of Italy, all of the central banks, Bank of England, BIS, etc., and all of the collusions between them, where the Rothschilds come in, where the Pope comes in, where the Euro royals come in, right? The so-called Illuminati, the bloodline families of Europe, where they come in. And then you've got Opus Dei, Club of Rome, and you've got the American secret societies, which are also connected, right? The Freemason societies, Skull and Bones, etc. So
yeah, I tend to refer to this group as Judeo-Masonic Satanists. At a certain level, we're dealing with Satanists.
Well, yes.
The Nazis were Satanists.
Yeah.
So while some people like to say, okay, the Nazis tried to save the world from the Jews. Well, the Nazis were, they were very involved in Satanism, and many of them were Jews. So, it becomes then
Well, they were also killing Jews. I mean, they did, take out Jews just as much as, the Polish people or anybody else. So there was a lot of in-killing going on as well, right?
Yeah.
So,
there's the satanic thing, unfortunately, is blood sacrifice for their ruler, Satan. So, they evidently get power from this and their rituals, etc. So this also then needs to be exposed because
the Satanist aspect and the Luciferian aspect, and I get funny emails sometimes from people who say that Lucifer is great, and what am I doing with my little series here with Dr. Karlstrom, trying to talk down the Luciferians, etc., when they're really, all about Lucifer, the god of light or angel of light or whatever it is. I guess he's, light is in his name. So
yeah, I mean, this is the spiritual aspect of this whole thing. There is this huge spiritual aspect to it, and we see this. Rauni Kilde recognized that this is a very satanic program. And the people doing it were Luciferians. Well, Luciferians are into death, and God and Jesus are into life, So you take a choice, what do you prefer, death or life? And unfortunately, the Department of Defense has become the Department of Death, and the intelligence agencies have become a death cult. So it's easy to get on board this death cult because that's where the power and the money and the greed are, from a personal and from a collective orientation. Personally, I think that it needs to be resisted because God made a beautiful planet here, and I do think humans are the crown of His creation, and I'm not in favor of genociding 5 billion humans.
No, not at all. And you see, I think what we are talking about right now is the core of the problem of here. The irony is that, you have this mechanism, the surveillance mechanism, which is the intelligence agencies and the military, daring to suggest that they are protecting us, protecting humanity within this continent, this country. We are engaging in national security, and we are going after anybody who is a terrorist. That's what they say, but what they're really going after is the ordinary people. And the people who stand out, people who speak out against corruption, people of integrity, whistleblowers, activists, journalists, dissidents, etc. The word dissident is questionable, really, because people are not dissidents. People are people who have minds of their own and who think for themselves and are critical thinkers. So what they're doing is they're going after the critical thinkers, they're going after the outspoken ones, and calling them and labeling them terrorists. So the extreme irony of this over here, you have this whole, conglomerate this war industry that has access to, has developed, and is using the most sophisticated weapons on the planet. We're now in the age of weapons of human manipulation. And see, this is another big, big issue that I'm very, very focused on. Everybody talks about nuclear weapons in mainstream media. They will not touch directed energy weapons. They will not touch electronic warfare weaponry. They will not touch weapons of human manipulation. This century is the century of human manipulation. It's a century of weapons of human manipulation that are being used against us of many, many different kinds, whether they're brain weapons or body weapons, neuro weapons and nano weapons, they are weapons of human manipulation. So when they will not talk about it, when they have this arsenal, when the military and intel agencies have this massive arsenal that they've developed over decades, and they're now using it against us, and then they're picking out people here and there and saying, we are terrorists. This is an absolute joke. This is totalitarianism bearing its fangs and claws and showing itself to all of us, but people aren't waking up. They are calling people terrorists because they wish to terrorize the population. They are currently terrorizing the population and using misnomers, calling people terrorists, mislabeling people terrorists who are activists for humanity, who are humanists, who are humanitarians. So humanitarians and humanists today are being called terrorists by this coterie of people who are inside the military and intel agencies and are using weapons and others.
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, I mean, this is the, control, money, power, control, money, power. They believe that that's what they have to do, so how do you manipulate the masses to get them to fall in line? Everything is for that. And of course, what that does is that puts a bag over all human creativity and progress
and the slaughtering of consciousness.
Slaughtering of consciousness with these directed energy weapons. And by the way, yes, in the 1980s and 90s, the U.S. military said, hey, we've had a revolution in military affairs, RMA. And that is the use of these directed energy weapons, which people can't see. But that has revolutionized war. So what we're talking about actually is the new war against the population on the part of the elite, against us. Now, maybe Americans can wake up and realize that our tax dollars are going to our government, which is controlled by the secret government, to wage war against us. Well, that's not a good deal, is it? That's a terrible deal. So,
and that's the new enemy. You see, Dr. Kilde was talking about how Americans always want an enemy, and they concoct some country as the enemy. But we're living in an age when the new enemy is humanity awakening. And the people who are declaring war on us are our own governments, our own militaries, our own intelligence agencies, our own police mechanism.
Yeah, and the mechanism for this, and I can just mention this quickly, the 1992 Rio Earth Summit, organized by Marie Strong for the UN, brought together, 5,000 non-governmental organizations in all the nations of the world, and they were supposed to sit down and figure out how to save the world with a biodiversity convention and a climate change convention, and all these different things. And they accepted the proposition that we need to reduce the population by 2/3 to save the planet. Now, I'm an earth scientist. I know the planet's doing fine. It's been here for almost 5 billion years. It's going to be here for another 5 billion years. So it has nothing to do with saving the planet. It has to do with the eugenics goal of the ruling elite, which has been their goal for a long time. And we can trace that through America and Britain and over to the Nazis and whatnot. So yeah, this pseudo-scientific notion that there's an overpopulation problem, it's a lie. It's one more lie.
It's back to that patronizing authoritarian sort of takeover kind of mentality where, some people decide that they have to act like parents for humanity and make decisions for humanity, because you see, the rest of us are mentally retarded and can't think for ourselves. So
they are our managers. They are the experts, and the trouble is that a lot of times they're much stupider than we are, actually. And Rauni Kilde.
Of course they are. I mean, this very attitude reeks of stupidity. It reeks of extreme stupidity to me. Extreme lunacy, really, because it's very appropriative.
It's appropriative, it's patronizing, it's condescending. It's abhorrent in every single way. It does not speak of intelligence, and this is why the word intelligence as connected with intelligence agencies really makes me laugh. These guys are not practicing intelligence.
Well, what it is deception and corruption and perversion, really. I mean, if you look into the human trafficking, the child trafficking, the drug trafficking that the intelligence does, it's mafia, systematic corruption. But when in 1992 the Rio Earth Summit met, they got something like 192 nations to sign on to Agenda 21, Agenda for the 21st Century, as soft law. Now, it was never adopted by our Congress. It never told what it was to our population. But our Forest Service, our Park Service, our Bureau of Land Management, all our federal agencies signed on to this thing. And these agencies also then went on to get their own anti-terrorism bureaus, you see, which then were subsumed under the Department of Homeland Security when it formed in 2002 as a response to this, false flag event 9/11, which came to us from our own government and Israel.
And Israel, let's not forget Israel.
Yeah, I mean, it's merged, like Bobby Fischer said. I mean, they're interchangeable. The U.S. government is owned by
That's right, and that's why I actually take exception to the use of the term U.S. empire. I see some journalists using the term U.S. empire, and no, it's not the U.S. empire. It's the U.S., Israeli, British, Saudi, Rothschild, Vatican, Zionist empire. It's not just the U.S.
Black nobility, yeah, the elite.
The black nobility, etc., the Euro royals, throw them in there, yeah.
Yeah. But don't forget that the Rothschilds control the central banks of all nations.
Yes.
The private central banks, and that the Rothschilds are the king of the Jews. And so they, in the 1900, they owned over half the wealth of the world. And so the only power in Europe was Rothschild, they said at that time, 1900. Okay, so this is, the spearhead of this world revolutionary movement, to overturn all the governments, to destroy all religions, to destroy the family, to destroy all private property. And so this goes back to the 1776 Bavarian Illuminati mandate in their own documents, saying this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it. It's a declaration of war against humanity. And just like the protocols of the learned elders of Zion, not only a declaration of war, it's a battle plan. Here's how we're going to do it. So again, if people want to get off their butts and actually read these things, you can't just sit around and watch TV and expect to learn anything. Individuals have to read. They have to fill their brains with information that can actually help them instead of...
Yes, unfortunately, many of us don't have a real rooting in history, in terms of our education. So I have to say, I'm finding it extraordinarily illuminating, really, to be reading history now and be reading books, from people who are historians who've delved into this, whether it's the history of the Zionists or the Jesuits or the history of America, the Founding Fathers, or, Anthony Sutton's American Secret Societies. I'm learning a great deal about the power structure, the hidden power structure behind the foundings and running of governments across time over the last few centuries, certainly. And you do begin to see there are power networks, and there are certain people who've had power in their hands for a long time. And, when you look at money, of course, it all comes down to that whole issue of fiat currency and pulling money out of thin air, which the central banks are doing. And that's how the Rothschilds rose to the top and continue to stay at the top, unfortunately.
Yeah, and we have to acknowledge the existence and the power of the occult. The occult world is a hidden world. Okay, these secret societies, they believe they have secret knowledge, which of course allows them to rule the rest of us. And now these things are coming out. You and I are speaking about them. But for most of our parents and grandparents' times,
That's right. They were not known. Nobody spoke about it. They were not known. You're right.
But now it's coming out, so people can learn these things. As I've studied these things in the context of the New Age movement, which goes back to theosophy, which goes back to the Kabbalah and the Talmud And we're Satanism, bottom line.
And, it's really interesting because it's only in this time period that all of our understanding and worldviews are being challenged, because many people grow up thinking, I'm talking about the atheistic contingent, they grow up thinking that there is no real other dimension, other world. That's just, religion, opiate for the masses, these people who think about heaven and hell, etc. And then you come to find out that you have this power structure that's been established that's made an ardent study of the occult, that's used black magic, has summoned demons, uses demonic spirits to guide them and give them power. So, at that point, you begin to wake up and say, hello, what on earth is going on? Obviously, this reality that we know is not the only one. There's something else going on.
Very well said. And of course, bringing it back to Dr. Rauni Kilde, she had this whole worldview, but she said that the TI phenomenon, the targeting, this is done by human beings, So,
oh, yeah, she did. And, I have to say just one little word about what she brings to the table regarding the other world, the other dimensions, etc. It's true. I'm like you as far as the UFO and the ET phenomenon is concerned. It's interesting to me, but I haven't made a study of it and I'm not an expert, so I don't go there. But the other part of what she talks about, that, we are multidimensional beings, that we have a spirit, a soul, that when we die, we never really die, that our spirit simply removes from our material body and exists in a different dimension. I find all of that fascinating because that, in a sense, is played out in our lives, isn't it? Because and this connects a little bit with the paranormal, certainly, with things like clairvoyance and psychic abilities and telepathy. And I'm talking about organic telepathy, not synthetic, which we all know about now. Ways in which we are connected with each other, with our own families, with our loved ones across time and space sometimes. And, things like that. Ways in which it seems as if we exist in a reality that's not just material. I think all of us have had experiences of some kind that indicate to us that there's something else going on in a positive way, not in a negative black magic occultist way, but in a more positive way.
I think the positive and the negative poles are there, always. And this is a huge subject, and obviously you're interested in this. I'm interested in this. Maybe some other time we can get into it. But Dr. Rauni Kilde, very interested in it. But yeah, this is what we see, the physical world, the material world is not the whole picture. I don't believe that. I do believe in life after death, etc. I take a more Christian view of heaven and hell. But Rauni Kilde's attitude is a little more like Buddhism, where you have reincarnation and you can't kill the energy body of a human. But she does say that with these directed energy weapons, they can target the light bodies.
She does say that they are targeting the energy bodies, and that's why they're called psychotronic weapons too, because they are, kind of attacking your psychic centers of power, your chakra system and your energy system.
All of that, yeah, it's very sophisticated. But we know that the CIA has been working on these things with their Project Often and things like that. They've been researching the occult and going to the occult experts. So you could say there has been a merger, that the CIA kind of slipped, below that line, between falling and fallen. It actually went over to the dark side.
Oh, they never stopped themselves, right? This is the thing about the CIA. They just had no boundaries. And this goes back to, how the CIA was formed, who comprises the CIA, right? All those paperclip Nazis. Hitler's Eastern Front.
Well, if you listen to the excellent videos by Michael Rupert, who wrote the book Crossing the Rubicon after 9/11, most of the directors of the CIA have been Wall Street bankers and lawyers, like Alan Dulles. So you're dealing with people who are, right there in the center of the financial power structure.
Very, very interesting, isn't it? So it's like these money-grubbing millionaires also running the surveillance society against us.
Yeah, and it's as if that criminal syndicate has taken over the governments of the world, so that the governments of the world, like the United States, then take on those aspects. It is a criminal syndicate now. If you listen to the work of Catherine Austin Fitts, and $23 trillion is missing here, and $5 trillion is missing there. with unaccountable adjustments, what's going on, who do they serve? Do they serve the people? Certainly not. They don't serve the people. They serve this criminal syndicate. So then they become like that criminal syndicate in their MO. And the CIA is enormously influential in this transition because they've infiltrated all branches of society and government and corporations. And then this other group I mentioned, this other fifth column group, likewise, so it's almost like we're dealing with a whole series of Russian dolls,
That really looks like it, yeah.
And then on the inside, the smaller dolls controlling the bigger dolls, So maybe you have 6,000 people in the Council on Foreign Relations, and the outer 4,000, have no clue what's going on, really. But then the inner 100 or 150 or whatever, they know what's going on, and they're controlling it.
And
so
looking at some of their bios, you also see they walk in and out, don't they, of the military or private sector, intelligence, private sector, etc. That revolving door, I think, marks the CFR.
Yeah, excellent point. Excellent point. That's how it happens, with the revolving door. And there are so many examples of that. We could do a whole show on just so-and-so and what they did, moving back and forth across these lines.
That's very true. And, perhaps we should at some point focus on just those guys, the CFR, the Bilderbergers, etc., the World Economic Forum, the guys who meet at Davos, Switzerland, etc., all of them. We should at some point. I have to tell you, the time is looking like we have to wrap this up in a few minutes, Eric. So what shall we talk about as we once again, think about Dr. Kilde, the great work that she's done speaking out, letting everybody know, and, just to let other people know, people who are not familiar with who she is, to get on the web and start listening to her videos, because this is a lady who did some enormous research on her own, enormous thinking, enormous synthesizing, enormous putting together of info, and has published a great deal and has spoken a great deal on the subject of neuroweapons. Neurocognitive weapons, I hear, is what the army is calling it. Neurocognitive weapons, neuroweapons of different kinds, nano weapons, directed energy weapons, non-lethal weapons, anti-personnel weapons, you name it. These days they're all being hidden under those names: minimal risk, deterrence, peace enforcement, peacekeeping, peacekeeping weapons from the police department.
Yeah, and it's been a great conversation, Romola. As usual, I thank you so much for your efforts, which are nonstop and 500%. And we're building on the what we've learned from people like Dr. Rauni Kilde, and I think it's very fitting that we honor her as the extraordinary human being that she was. And,
yes, absolutely.
And still is, I guess, if you kind of buy into her worldview. Death is not really the end. And she very much believed that. So, she says that, the car is the body and the driver is the mind. And, the car might get wrecked or might get old or whatever, but the mind continues. I think in some form that I certainly agree with that. But
that's right, and that's what a lot of afterlife researchers also bring to the table and say, it's the mind and the consciousness that continues as the spirit, and that's really one of the things that I take away from what she says. And in terms of effort and continuance of effort, she's somebody who continued her efforts across the decades of her life. She never stopped. She never gave up. And she always had the spirit of positivity and enthusiasm about her when she went out and gave talks, like, for instance, when she went to the covert harassment conferences, I think, in Berlin and elsewhere, maybe Belgium as well, before, they were conducted for a period of time, I think, before 2015. And so she's inspiring. She's inspiring as a role model, as, someone to learn from. And this can be a bit of a drag, the subject matter that we're talking about. And the fact that all of us are being hit with weapons as we are speaking about the existence of these weapons is also a huge drag. But, in a sense, it's also an incentive, because we have been incentivized to let the world know that this is going on, these weapons are being used, and people better wake up and, start paying attention, because these weapons are being hidden for a very good reason. And unless people figure out that these weapons should not be hidden, we all should know about them. We should all be speaking about them. And we should be doing our best to stop them being used, to terminate, to bring the use of these weapons to a close. There's going to be no future for humanity. So in a sense, that's we are being given that incentive, that inspiration to continue because we have that fire now. That fire has been lit in us. And, it's.
I'm glad you're a fighter because this is what it is. We're at war now. We're at war for humanity. And we're not just at war for the TI community, we're at war for humanity. Everyone is a target, as Rauni Kilde pointed out. So I would like to just, finish with quick two things, if you don't mind. And again, so much came out today. Who killed Dr. Rauni Kilde? Would you like to answer that?
Well, I think she was in a place where Norwegian intelligence was heavily active, right? She lived in the Scandinavian countries, Norway and Finland and so forth. So, and I understand that Norwegian intelligence is, sort of like the CIA in those parts. It's one of those entrenched intel operations that's pretty vicious. And so she's spoken about them, so I would say Norwegian intelligence, the military, the NATO, and, look at what's happening here in the US. The CIA is a huge presence here, and the CIA is supposed to have a huge presence in Europe as well. So maybe it was a combination of the CIA, Norwegian intelligence, and NATO. What do you think?
And yes, and the organization that she outlines quite well.
The organization, yes.
Which those things are apart. The organization has a distinct mafioso aspect. And so those groups that you mentioned are teamed up, joined at the hip, joined wherever with the world mafia. And
unfortunately, the U.S. Department of Defense is also part of it. The U.S. Army, etc. All of those, institutions that were named in the document she shows in the Miles Johnston interview. She shows a list of these organizations and institutions. So I suggest that everybody go and listen to that. We haven't had time today to play the other clip, but that clip was taken from that interview, the Miles Johnston interview, where she talks about how these mind control and directed energy weapons are being used against people, both from satellites and from portable handhelds. Neighbors are involved, and she shows a diagram where, neighbors are using the weapons against someone else, etc. And she talks also about how the mind and the brain have been decoded for a very long time. And, there's a lot of disinfo and misinfo circulating currently that, and also public domain neuroscience pretends that, brains aren't being read. But we have a very different picture from some of the whistleblowing, some of the military documents, and people like Dr. Kilde, who are talking about how it's been going on for a very long time. And of course, TIs are telling us this as well, right? TIs are telling us this from their own experiences, that there's no way something could have happened unless their minds were read. So that, I would suggest, is exactly what's going on, because the military has a habit of hiding things from us for decades, and so do the intel agencies. So.
Okay, and then my last question to you, and that was a brilliant answer. I think you're right. What does the TI community stand to teach the world about 5G?
Oh, 5G, that's right. We have to talk about 5G another time in a more detailed way. But, in a sense, what those who are targeted are speaking out about today are that things like millimeter wave weapons, which are, by the way, being tested by the U.S. Air Force. I have looked at some of the documents and some of the statements of work. They are being
tested on us.
They are being tested on us.
For the 5G lockdown.
We're the beta test. Thank you. Yes, you're spelling it out. Yes, so we are the beta test. These guys are guys who have no morals, no morality, no virtue, no scruples, no boundaries. They set no boundaries on what they can do. They have decided to test weapons on humans, and these are weapons for use on humans. So this is why the message that we bring is extremely urgent, and this is the message Dr. Kilde brings as well, that these are weapons of human destruction, human manipulation at the level of the body and at the level of the brain, and also at the level of the psyche and the mind and the consciousness, right? So for all of these reasons, these weapons need to be stopped. So that's my last word on it.
Thank you. Well, that's well said, and I think we covered the waterfront there, and we did honor Dr. Kilde and her tremendous contribution. So thank you very much for this discussion.
Yes, thank you very much, Eric. Thanks, everyone, for watching. And no doubt we'll come back and, bring Dr. Kilde's back to life again in our conversations as we proceed. but it's been very good to speak about her this morning and to learn from her. So thanks, everyone. Have a great day, and we will see you again very soon. Bye-bye.